The rain fell hard that night in London, cold, relentless. The kind of rain that soaked through clothing in seconds and turned the streets into rivers of black glass. Inside Buckingham Palace, the lights glowed warm against the storm. But outside, in the shadows, something was wrong. Officer James Harlow stood at his post near the east entrance. His uniform was drenched. Water dripped from the brim of his cap. He had been on duty for 6 hours, and his shift wouldn't end for another 2. But he didn't mind. This was his job, his duty. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family, and he meant every word of it. James was not like the other guards. He didn't come from a long line of military men. His father had been a teacher, his mother a nurse. He grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, but James had always wanted more. He wanted to serve, to protect, to stand for something greater than himself. And now, here he was, standing in the rain, watching, waiting. Then he heard it, a sound. Faint at first, like footsteps, but not the kind you hear from tourists or staff. These were different, deliberate, careful. Someone was trying not to be heard. James's heart quickened. He turned his head slowly, scanning the darkness. The palace grounds were vast. Trees swayed in the wind. Shadows danced across the wet stone paths. But there near the garden wall he saw movement. A figure, dressed in black, moving toward the palace. James didn't hesitate. He reached for his radio. His hand was steady, even though his pulse was racing. He pressed the button and spoke quietly into the device. "This is Officer Harlow. East entrance. I have an unidentified individual approaching the perimeter. Requesting backup." Response came quickly. "Copy that. Backup en route. Stay alert." James watched the figure. It moved closer, closer, and then it stopped. The person seemed to be studying the building, looking for something, an entry point maybe, or a weak spot. James took a breath. He stepped forward, his boots splashing through puddles. His hand moved to his side, resting on the handle of his baton. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he was ready if he had to. "Stop right there," James called out. His voice cut through the rain like a blade, firm, commanding. "This is a restricted area. Identify yourself." The figure froze. For a moment, nothing happened. The rain fell. The wind howled. And then the figure turned. James couldn't see the face. Not clearly. The person wore a hood pulled low, and the darkness hid everything else. But he could feel the tension in the air. Something was about to happen. He could sense it. And then the figure ran. Not away. Toward the palace, James didn't think. He just moved. His training kicked in. He sprinted forward, his legs pumping hard against the slick ground. The figure was fast. Too fast. But James was faster. Behind him, he heard the sound of doors opening. Backup was coming. But there was no time to wait. Because tonight, someone had come for the royal family, and James Harlow was the only thing standing in their way. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. James closed the distance fast. His breath came in sharp bursts. His boots hammered against the stone. The figure ahead was quick, weaving between hedges and stone pillars, but James had trained for this. He had run drills, chased suspects. He knew how to read movement. The figure veered left, heading toward a side entrance. One of the service doors. James's mind raced. If the intruder made it inside, everything would change. The palace would go into lockdown. Alarms would sound. And wheresoever this was, might reach someone. A member of staff? A guest? Or worse. A royal James pushed harder. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. The figure reached the door and grabbed the handle. It turned unlocked. Someone had left it open. A mistake. Or something worse. James lunged forward. His hand shot out and grabbed the figure's shoulder. He pulled back hard, spinning the person around. They stumbled, lost balance, and then, in one swift motion, James pinned them against the wall. "Don't move," James said, his voice low and hard. He held the figure firmly, his forearm pressed across their chest. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The figure struggled, tried to twist free, but James held tight. His training had taught him how to control without causing harm, how to subdue without injury, and then the hood fell back. James froze. It was a woman, young, maybe early 20s. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. But there was something else there too. Desperation. Panic. "Please," she gasped. "Please, you have to listen to me." James didn't loosen his grip. "Who are you?" "My name is Emily," she said, her voice shaking. "Emily Carter. I work here. I'm on the cleaning staff." James frowned. He didn't recognize her. But the palace employed hundreds of people. He couldn't know them all. "If you work here, why were you sneaking around? Why did you run?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Because I saw something. Something I wasn't supposed to see." James felt a chill run down his spine. "What did you see?" Emily glanced around as if she expected someone to appear from the shadows. "There's a man. Inside the palace? He doesn't belong here. He's dressed like one of us. Like staff. But I saw him earlier tonight. He was in the West Wing. Near the private quarters?" James's stomach dropped. The West Wing. That was where Princess Anne was staying tonight. She had arrived earlier that day for a private family gathering. Security had been notified, but the threat level was low. Or so they thought. What was he doing? James asked. "I don't know," Emily said. But he had something with him. A bag. He kept checking his watch. Like he was waiting for something. And when he saw me, he looked at me like he wanted to make sure I didn't talk. James's mind raced. He needed to confirm this. Fast. He reached for his radio again. But before he could speak, Emily grabbed his arm. "Wait," she said. "He's not alone. I think there are others. I saw him talking to someone on a phone. He said something about 10 minutes. That was 5 minutes ago." James's blood ran cold. 10 minutes. That meant whatever was happening now. He released Emily and stepped back. "Go to the main security office. Tell them everything you just told me. Do it now." Emily nodded, her face pale. She turned and ran toward the main building. James looked at the door. The one Emily had been trying to reach. The one that led inside. He could wait for backup. Follow protocol. Stay outside and secure the perimeter, or he could go in. He thought of Princess Anne. He thought of his oath. His duty, and then he made his choice. James pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway was dimly lit. Empty, silent, except the faint hum of machinery. Somewhere deep in the building he moved forward, quietly, carefully. His hand hovered near his radio, ready to call for help if he saw anything, and then he heard it. Footsteps. Coming from the stairwell ahead, slow, measured. Someone was coming. James pressed himself against the wall. His breathing slowed.
Ow!
His senses sharpened. The footsteps grew louder, closer. He could hear the faint creak of shoes on the old wooden stairs. Whoever it was, they were trying to stay quiet, but not quiet enough. He waited. Every muscle in his body coiled tight. Ready. A shadow appeared at the top of the stairwell. Then a figure emerged. A man, mid-30s, average height. Wearing the uniform of palace maintenance staff, dark trousers, a white shirt. A laminated ID badge clipped to his chest, but something was off. The man's movements were too careful, too calculated. His eyes scanned the hallway like a predator searching for prey. James stayed still, hidden in the alcove near the wall. Watched as the man walked past, heading toward the corridor that led to the West Wing. The private quarters. James's heart pounded. This was him, the man Emily had seen. And he was heading straight for Princess Anne. James waited until the man turned the corner. Then he moved. silently. He followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. His training kicked in again. How to tail a suspect, how to stay unseen. The man stopped at a door, one of the service closets. He looked around, checking to make sure he was alone. Then he opened the door and slipped inside. James approached carefully. He reached the door and pressed his ear against it. He could hear movement inside, the sound of a bag being unzipped, the rustle of fabric. James's hand moved to his radio. He needed to call this in. Get back up. Get armed officers here now. But before he could press the button, the door flew open. The man stood there, and in his hand was a gun. James didn't hesitate. He grabbed the man's wrist and twisted hard. The gun fell to the floor with a clatter. The man grunted and swung his free hand at James's face. James ducked. The punch missed by inches. They grappled. James used his weight to push the man back against the wall. The man was strong, trained. He fought back with sharp, precise movements, a knee to James's ribs, an elbow to his shoulder. Pain shot through James's body, but he didn't let go. Code the man's hand. The man's hand shot out toward the fallen gun. James saw it. He released his grip and kicked the weapon down the hallway. It skidded across the floor and disappeared into the darkness. The man snarled, his eyes filled with rage. He lunged at James again. This time James was ready. He sidestepped and brought his arm down hard on the back of the man's neck. The man stumbled, fell to one knee. James moved fast, grabbed the man's arm and twisted it behind his back. The man struggled, tried to break free, but James held firm. You're done, James said through gritted teeth. It's over, the man laughed. A low, bitter sound. You think this is over? You have no idea what's coming? James's blood turned to ice. What are you talking about? The man didn't answer. He just smiled. And then from somewhere in the building, James heard it. A sound that made his stomach drop. An explosion. The walls shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. The lights flickered. James's grip loosened for just a second. That was all the man needed. He twisted free, slammed his head back into James's face, and ran. James staggered, his vision blurred. Blood dripped from his nose, but he pushed through the pain, ran after the man. But the man was gone, disappeared into the chaos. James stopped. His breath came in ragged gasps. His mind raced. The explosion. It had come from the West Wing. From the private quarters, from where Princess Anne was staying, James ran. He ran faster than he had ever run in his life. His legs burned, his lungs screamed, but he didn't stop. He burst through the doors into the West Wing. Smoke filled the air. Alarms blared. People were shouting. Staff members ran in every direction, panic written across their faces. James pushed through the crowd. He reached Princess Anne's suite. The door was damaged, scorched, but still intact. He pounded on it. Your Highness, this is Officer Harlow. Are you all right? No response. James's heart hammered in his chest. He tried the handle, locked from the inside. Princess Anne. He shouted again, and then from inside he heard a voice, calm, steady. I'm fine, officer. But I think you should come in. James didn't understand. Why did she sound so calm? What was happening? He stepped back and prepared to kick the door in. But before he could, it opened. And standing there, unharmed and composed, was Princess Anne. But she wasn't alone. Behind Princess Anne stood 2 armed security officers. Their weapons were drawn. Their faces were tense but controlled. And on the floor, bound and unconscious, was another man. Dressed in the same maintenance uniform as the one James had fought, James stared. Confusion flooded his mind. Your Highness? What? Princess Anne raised a hand. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were sharp, alert.
Officer Harlow, is it?
James nodded. His throat felt dry. Yes, ma'am. You're the one who reported the intruder at the east entrance. Yes, ma'am. Then you saved my life tonight, she said simply. And I intend to thank you properly. But first we need to secure this building. There may be more of them. James's mind raced. More of them. The man he'd fought had said something similar. You have no idea what's coming. This wasn't just one person. It was a coordinated attack. Ma'am, James said urgently, I encountered one of them downstairs. He had a weapon. I disarmed him, but he escaped. He said, this wasn't over. Princess Anne's expression hardened. She turned to one of the officers beside her. Contact the security command center. Full lockdown. Every exit sealed. Every room searched. No one leaves until we find them all. The officer nodded and spoke rapidly into his radio. James looked at the man on the floor. What happened here? He came through the window, Princess Anne said, her voice steady. Used a small explosive charge to weaken the frame. Quite clever, really. But he didn't account for the reinforced glass we had installed last year. It held long enough for my detail to respond. James felt a wave of relief wash over him. She was safe, but the danger wasn't over. Ma'am, you need to be moved to a secure location, James said. Somewhere underground. The vault room? Maybe. Until we know how many of them there are? Princess Anne studied him for a moment. Her gaze was penetrating, assessing. You're right, of course. But I'm not leaving until I know my staff are safe. And my family. James understood. She wasn't just royalty. She was a leader. And leaders didn't run. And let me help, James said. I know this building. I know the weak points. Let me help find them. Princess Anne nodded. Very well. But you stay with my detail. No heroics. Understood? James nodded. Understood. They moved quickly. Princess Anne, surrounded by her security team, was escorted down a secure corridor toward the vault room. James stayed close, his eyes scanning every shadow, every doorway. As they walked, James's radio crackled to life. All units, this is command. We have reports of 3 additional suspects on the grounds. 2 near the north gate, 1 in the kitchen area. All armed. Exercise extreme caution. James's jaw tightened. 3 more. That made 5 in total. Maybe more they didn't know about yet. They reached the vault room. A reinforced steel door set deep in the palace's foundation. The security team opened it and ushered Princess Anne inside. She turned to James before entering. Officer Harlow, she said, you've done well tonight. But the danger isn't over. These men came here for a reason. They wanted something. Or someone. Until we know what we're all at risk. James met her eyes. We'll find them, ma'am. I promise. Princess Anne gave him a small, almost sad smile. I believe you will. The door closed. Locked from the inside, Princess Anne was safe now. Protected by layers of steel and stone and the best security in the world. But James's job wasn't finished. He turned to one of the officers. Where do you need me? Kitchen area, the officer said. 1 suspect is barricaded in there. We need every hand we can get. James nodded. He followed the officer down another corridor, his mind racing. The kitchen. It was a large space. Lots of places to hide. Lots of potential weapons. Knives, fire, gas lines. They reached the kitchen entrance. A dozen officers were already there, weapons drawn, forming a perimeter. Inside, they could hear movement. The clatter of metal, a voice shouting orders. James approached the senior officer in charge. What's the situation? 1 male suspect. Armed with a handgun. He's taken to kitchen staff hostage. Says he'll kill them if we don't let him leave. James's heart sank. Hostages. This just got a lot worse. Has he made any other demands? James asked. No, just wants out. But he's not stupid. He knows we won't let him walk. He's stalling, waiting for something. Waiting. The word echoed in James's mind. Waiting for what? Backup? A distraction? And then it hit him. The explosion. The attacks at multiple points. It wasn't just about killing Princess Anne. It was about creating chaos. Dividing security. Stretching them thin is a diversion, James said suddenly. He's keeping us here while the others do something else? The senior officer frowned. What do you mean? Think about it, James said urgently. Why take hostages in the kitchen? It's not near any exit. It's not near the royal quarters. He's just buying time. Officer's eyes widened. He grabbed his radio. "Command, this is Delta Team. We believe the kitchen suspect is a diversion. Request immediate sweep of all high-value areas." The response came fast. "Copy that. Sweeps in progress." James felt his pulse quicken. They were missing something. Something important. And then, from somewhere deep in the palace, came another sound. Gunfire. The gunfire echoed through the palace like thunder. 3 shots. Then silence. Then more. James's blood ran cold. Someone was in a firefight. And it sounded close. The radio exploded with voices, shouting, commands, panic. Shots fired. Vault corridor. Repeat. Shots fired near the vault. James's heart stopped. The vault. Where they'd just taken Princess Anne. He didn't think. He just ran. His legs carried him down the corridor, back the way they'd come. Behind him, he heard the senior officer shouting orders, but James didn't stop. He couldn't. The vault was supposed to be the safest place in the palace. Steel walls. Reinforced doors. A place where nothing could reach them, but someone had reached it. James rounded the corner and skidded to a halt. The scene before him was chaos. 2 security officers were down, wounded but alive. Another officer was pinned behind a pillar, returning fire. And standing near the vault door, with a rifle in his hands, was the man James had fought earlier, the man who had escaped. James's mind raced. How did he get here so fast? How did he know where they'd taken her? And then James saw it. The earpiece in the man's ear, a small, nearly invisible communication device. He wasn't working alone. He'd been listening the whole time. Tracking their movements, the man fired again. The officer behind the pillar ducked. The bullet sparked off the stone inches from his head. James had no weapon, no gun, just his training and his courage. He moved without thinking. He sprinted forward, using the chaos as cover. The man was focused on the officer. He didn't see James coming. James hit him like a freight train. They both went down hard, crashing to the floor. The rifle flew from the man's hands and skidded across the polished marble. The man recovered quickly. He was trained. Dangerous. He drove his elbow into James's ribs. Pain exploded through James's side. But he held on. He couldn't let go. They rolled, grappled, fists flew. James took a punch to the jaw. His vision blurred, but he fought through it. He had to. The man reached for something at his belt. A knife. James saw the glint of metal and grabbed the man's wrist. They struggled. The blade hovered between them, each man fighting for control. James could feel his strength fading. His ribs ached. His face throbbed. But he thought of Princess Anne, of his oath, of the reason he'd become a guard in the first place. To protect. To serve. To stand between danger and those who couldn't fight for themselves. With a surge of strength, James twisted the man's wrist. Hard. The knife fell. James grabbed it and pressed it against the man's throat. "Don't move," James said, his voice raw. "It's over." The man stared up at him. Rage burned in his eyes. But slowly he raised his hands. The officer emerged from behind the pillar, his weapon trained on the man. "I've got him," he said to James. "You can let him go." James stood, his legs shaking. His entire body screamed in pain, but he was alive. And more importantly, Princess Anne was safe. Within minutes, the palace was flooded with reinforcements. Armed officers swept every room, every corridor, every closet. One by one, the remaining suspects were found and apprehended. The man in the kitchen was subdued. The 2 near the north gate were captured without incident. By dawn, it was over. The threat was neutralized. The palace was secure. James sat on a bench in the courtyard, a medic bandaging his ribs. His face was swollen. His body ached. But he was smiling. "You did good, son," the medic said. "Real good." James nodded. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired, and then he heard footsteps. He looked up. Princess Anne stood before him. She was escorted by her security detail, but she'd insisted on coming out. On seeing him, James tried to stand, but she raised a hand. "Please, Officer Harlow, rest." She sat down beside him. For a moment, they were just two people. No titles, no uniforms. Just two people who had survived a night they'd never forget. "You saved my life tonight," Princess Anne said quietly. "Twice. First, when you stopped that man outside. And again when you stopped him at the vault." James shook his head. "I was just doing my job, ma'am." "No," she said firmly. "You went beyond your job. You risked your life. For me, for people you've never met. That's not duty. That's courage." James didn't know what to say. He'd never been good with words. He just did what felt right. Princess Anne stood. She looked down at him with something like respect in her eyes. "I'm going to make sure the world knows what you did tonight, Officer Harlow. You're a hero. Whether you believe it or not," James felt his throat tighten. "I'm no hero, ma'am. I'm just a man who stood where he needed to stand." Princess Anne smiled. A real smile. Warm and genuine. "Then you're exactly the kind of man we need more of." She turned and walked away, her security team surrounding her once more. But before she disappeared into the palace, she looked back at him one last time, and in that moment, James understood something. He hadn't just protected a princess. He'd reminded himself why he'd chosen this path, why he'd taken the oath, because some things were worth standing for, worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. The days that followed were strange for James. His name was suddenly everywhere. Newspapers, television, social media. The guard who saved a princess, Buckingham Palace hero. The man who stood against terror. He hated it. James had never wanted fame. He'd never wanted attention. He just wanted to do his job, to serve with honor, to go home at the end of each shift knowing he'd done his best. But the world had other ideas. He was called into meetings, debriefings, interviews. Everyone wanted to know what he'd felt, what he'd thought, why he'd done what he'd done. The truth was simple. He'd done it because it was right, because someone needed help, because he'd taken an oath, but people wanted more. They wanted drama, emotion, a story they could feel, so James gave them what he could. He answered questions. He shook hands. He smiled for cameras, but inside, he just wanted to go back to his post. To the rain. To the quiet. 2 weeks after the attack, James was summoned to a private meeting. He was told only to wear his dress uniform and to arrive at 10 in the morning. He had no idea what to expect when he arrived. He was led through corridors he'd never seen before, deep into the palace. 2 rooms where tourists never went, where even most staff never went. And then he was brought to a drawing room, elegant, filled with paintings and antique furniture. And standing there waiting for him was Princess Anne. "Officer Harlow," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." James shook her hand. "Of course, ma'am." She gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." They sat across from each other. A tea service sat on the table between them. It felt surreal. James, the son of a teacher and a nurse, having tea with a princess. "I wanted to speak with you privately," Princess Anne said. "Away from the cameras and the noise. I wanted to thank you, truly." "Already did, ma'am," James said. "Out in the courtyard." "That was more than enough," Princess Anne smiled. "That was for the cameras. This is between us." She poured tea for both of them. Her movements were graceful, but natural. Not performative. Just real. "No," she said. "I've met thousands of people in my life. Soldiers, diplomats, leaders, but few have impressed me the way you did that night. Not because of your bravery, though that was extraordinary, but because of your humility." James felt his face warm. "I don't understand, ma'am." "You don't see yourself as special," she said. "You don't think what you did was remarkable. You just think you were doing your job. That's rare, Officer Harlow. Most people who do something brave can't wait to tell everyone about it. But you just want to go back to standing in the rain." James smiled despite himself. The rain's not so bad, Princess Anne laughed. A genuine, unguarded laugh. You're a good man, James. May I call you James? Of course, ma'am. The world needs more people like you, she said. People who stand when it's hard, who protect without asking for anything in return, who see duty not as a burden but as a privilege. James didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. Princess Anne reached into a small box beside her chair. She pulled out something wrapped in velvet. She set it on the table and unwrapped it carefully. It was a medal. Gold and silver on a ribbon of deep blue. Yes. This is the Royal Victorian Medal, Princess Anne said. It's awarded for personal service to the monarchy, for actions above and beyond the call of duty. I want you to have it. James stared at the medal. His throat felt tight. Ma'am, I can't accept this. I was just doing your job, Princess Anne finished. No. But sometimes doing your job means being willing to die for someone you've never spoken to. For an oath you took years ago, for a principle you hold above your own life. That deserves recognition, James, whether you want it or not. She picked up the medal and stood. James stood as well. She pinned it to his uniform, her movements careful and deliberate. Wear it with pride, she said. Not for yourself, but for everyone who stands watch, everyone who protects, everyone who serves. James felt tears prick at his eyes. He fought them back. Thank you, ma'am. I'll do my best to honor it. Princess Anne stepped back and looked at him. You already have. I stood there for a moment. Two people who had shared something most people would never understand. A bond forged in danger. In trust. In the quiet knowledge that when it mattered most, someone had been there. I need to ask you something, Princess Anne said. The attackers. The ones we captured. They've been interrogated. They won't say much. But they did say one thing. They said they chose that night because they knew I'd be there. Because they wanted to send a message. James frowned. What kind of message? That no one is safe, she said quietly. That even the royal family can be reached. It was meant to create fear, to undermine trust in our institutions, in our security. James felt anger rise in his chest. They failed. They did, Princess Anne agreed. Because of you. And people like you. People who refuse to let fear win. She walked to the window and looked out at the palace grounds. The gardens were bright in the morning sun, peaceful, beautiful.
I want you to know something, James,
she said. That night changed me. It reminded me that the safety I take for granted is only possible because people like you are willing to stand in the rain, to face danger, to risk everything so others don't have to. I'll never forget that. James joined her at the window, and I'll never forget that when it mattered. You stayed calm. You trusted your team. You led. That's what real courage looks like, ma'am. Princess Anne turned to him. Her eyes were soft, grateful. Thank you, James, for everything. They shook hands. And then James was escorted back out of the palace. Back to the world outside. Back to his life. But he was different now. Not because of the medal. Not because of the fame, but because he knew, without a doubt, that he'd stood where he needed to stand. That he'd done what needed to be done. That he'd kept his oath. And for James Harlow, that was enough. 3 months later, James returned to his post. The rain was falling again. Cold. Relentless. But he didn't mind. He stood in the darkness, watching the palace grounds. Listening. Waiting. Ready to protect. Ready to serve? Ready to stand between danger and those who needed him. Because that's what heroes do. Even when no one's watching. Even when no one knows their name. They stand.